Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning back in again. We are going to continue forth with our notes to talk more about the powers of Congress and the limits of their power as well. So, in the Constitution, we have enumerated or expressed powers. Let me explain what that means. So, in terms of the ability to finance the national government, Congress essentially oversees that. They can levy, or collect taxes, borrow money, regulate commerce with foreign countries and between the states, coin money, establish standards of weights and measure, and additionally issue patents and copyrights. It should also be noticed that Congress can in fact establish post offices and postal roads. Although these powers might seem very basic, in a sense they're very valuable to our democracy and greater government. Additionally, Congress has the ability to defend the nation from invasion and insurrections. They can declare war. They can maintain the armed forces and the Army and the Navy. They can act and pass, other greater laws as well. Now, to pass laws, of course, they might be looking at specific things and issues like piracy, treason, and counterfeiting, and all this is in fact listed in the Constitution. Congress also has other special powers too. They can establish other federal courts as needed, and they also oversee process of naturalization, which is the legal process by which a citizen of one country becomes a citizen of another country. And we talked about that this year in the first unit. Now, there are also implied powers that Congress has too, which are a little bit different. The necessary and proper clause in the Constitution, or the elastic clause, basically gives Congress the authority to make laws and do things which are necessary for Congress to carry out at the express powers assigned by the Constitution. What that means in practice here is basically this. So Congress can only exercise the express powers and those implied powers absolutely necessary to carry them out. Essentially, they have the ability to enact in the best interest of the people, as long as they don't violate the Constitution. Essentially, this movement was led by Thomas Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists, who would essentially advocate for this interpretation of the Constitution. Some people say that we should have a loose construction of the Constitution. Other people, of course, might disagree. However, Congress has a broad range of powers to do its job. Alexander Hamilton was at the forefront of leading the movement to and for the Federalists to take on a different interpretation of the Constitution. Perhaps no example of this is more evident than looking at McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819, where the state of Maryland imposed a tax on the U.S. Bank in Baltimore. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the court's opinion establishing two important principles in constitutional law. First, the Constitution grants to Congress implied powers for implementing the Constitution's express powers in order to create a functional national government. Second, the state action may not impede valid constitutional exercises of power by the federal government. So essentially, the states can't just do, whatever they want. There's a balance here that must be understood. In terms of inherent powers, though, with Congress, we're talking about powers existing and belonging to the national government because they are inherent to a sovereign nation, and they keep us secure, safe, and steadfast. Our Congress can regulate immigration, acquire new territory, grant diplomatic recognition to other countries, and protect the nation from rebellion, and more. In terms of special powers of each house, we can hopefully delve a little bit deeper right now to give you more foresight and insight. So the House of Representatives can initiate charges of impeachment against a sitting president. In many ways, this is like an indictment. Also, all bills raising money must originate in the House, and if needed, of course elected by the state, one vote per state, the president from the top three electoral vote recipients. In terms of the Senate, they act as a jury for the impeachment proceedings that we just talked about on the previous slide. The Senate approves all foreign treaties. The Senate approves presidential appointments. If needed, they elect the vice president too from the top two electoral vote recipients. And we'll talk about special circumstances upon which that might be the case. But there are certain limits on powers of Congress. They can't do everything. And we're going to talk about that right now. Here are some limits on the powers of Congress. Now, the limits of Congress are stated in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. It says that Congress cannot pass ex post facto laws. What does that mean? That a law that makes illegal an act that was legal when committed is something that, of course, should not stand. Now, additionally, Congress cannot pass bills of attainder, which means that this is any act of a legislative body declaring a person or a group of persons guilty of a crime and assessing a punishment without the benefit of a trial. So no matter who you are, no matter how important you are, In a sense, the courts must work their process, and it's not Congress who gets to oversee that process. Now, Congress cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus, which you might not know what that means, but basically this is used to bring a prisoner or other detainee, an institutionalized mental patient, before the court to determine if the person's imprisonment or detention is lawful. Congress also cannot tax exports, favor trade of one state over another state, withdraw spend money from the treasury without a law, and grant titles of nobility. These things are prohibited. Other limits are as follows. The Ninth and Tenth Amendments reserve the power to the people and the states to have power and sovereignty to some level and degree. The president may also veto a law that Congress tries to pass, although there are certain stipulations beyond that which we'll get to later. And the Supreme Court may declare a law of Congress unconstitutional. If you think about the first unit of our class, and we talked about checks and balances, in many ways Congress is part of that system. And they're probably the most important part in many ways because not only do they make bills that become laws, essentially they have a lot of power over the other branches and us. However, as citizens of this country, we owe it to ourselves and our government to stay informed and to regulate Congress when and where we can. Thank you very much for tuning in, and good luck with completing the rest of the lesson.